The argument didn't start as an argument. It sounded like scheduling. My stepmother stood near the kitchen table with a sheet of paper in her hand, tapping it against her palm like she was trying to keep time. My dad sat down, shoulders slightly forward, eyes fixed on a coffee mug he wasn't drinking from. She said, calm and precise, he's old enough now. It makes sense. Not I. Always he. I stayed by the hallway because no one had told me to sit. The suitcase was already packed upstairs. I had done that the night before after hearing them whisper through the vent. My dad rubbed his thumb along the rim of the mug. Slow circles. Over and over, this doesn't have to be permanent. He said quietly. She sighed like he'd missed the point. It's not about permanent. It's about practical. I waited for him to look at me. He didn't. She finally turned. You can stay with friends. Or your aunt. It's time to start figuring things out. Her voice had that careful politeness people use with strangers. I said, Dad. He nodded once, still staring at the mug. Just go for now. It'll be easier this way. No explanation. No discussion. Just instructions. When I carried the suitcase down, he moved slightly to make space but didn't touch it. Didn't offer to drive me. Didn't ask where I was going. At the door, I stopped long enough to give him one last chance. He kept staring into the empty mug like it might answer for him, and that silence followed me longer than the eviction itself. It hadn't happened all at once. That's the part people never understand when I try to explain it. No single moment announced that I didn't belong there anymore. The house just adjusted around me until there wasn't room left. At first it was small things. My laundry stopped getting mixed in with theirs. A separate basket appeared in the hallway, like I was living in a shared apartment instead of my own home. Then my stepmother started reorganizing cabinets, and somehow the shelves I used ended up higher, farther back, harder to reach. She always had a reason. It looks cleaner this way. It makes more sense. It's more efficient. My dad agreed with everything in short sentences. Yeah. Sure. Sounds good. He used to ask about my day when he got home. That faded into nods from the doorway. Then even the nods stopped. Some nights he went straight upstairs without turning the hallway light on, like he already knew I wouldn't be waiting there. Dinner changed too. They started eating earlier. If I came down at the usual time, the plates were already rinsed and stacked in the rack. Sometimes a portion sat in the fridge with a sticky note that said help yourself, no name. No message, just instructions. One evening I noticed my photos were gone from the living room shelf. Not thrown away, just moved into a small pile on the corner of my desk. I asked my dad about it. He said, your stepmom's redecorating. That was it, no apology. No explanation, and somehow that quiet answer felt worse than if he had argued with me. The strange part was that my dad never acted like anything was wrong. When it was just the two of us in the room, he still spoke normally. He asked if I needed gas money sometimes, or if school was going okay. Not often, but enough to make me think maybe I was imagining the rest of it. One night he knocked on my door and handed me 20 in folded bills. Just in case, he said. I asked, in case of what? He hesitated a second too long before shrugging. You know. Stuff. Then he left before I could press him. I kept that money in my wallet for months without spending it. It felt less like help and more like a warning I didn't understand yet. He also started fixing things that weren't broken. The loose hinge on my closet door. The window latch that had worked fine for years. The dim light bulb in the hallway, small repairs. Always late at night, I would lie awake listening to the quiet tapping of tools through the wall. Slow, careful movements, like he was trying not to be heard. Once I stepped out and found him standing in the hallway with a tape measure stretched across my bedroom door. He flinched when he saw me. Just checking something, he said. What? Nothing important. He reeled the tape back in too fast, metal snapping sharply into the case. The next morning there was a new lock on my door. He said it was for privacy. But something about it felt backwards, like the lock wasn't meant to keep people out. It felt like it was meant to mark a boundary that already existed. The night before I left, I wasn't supposed to be home. I had told them I'd stay over at a friend's place, but plans fell through, and I came back late. The house was dark except for the kitchen light, and their voices carried through the floor vent near the hallway. I didn't mean to listen. At least that's what I told myself while I stayed there. My stepmother sounded sharper than usual. We can't keep delaying this. My dad said something too quiet to catch. She answered, you promised this would be handled. That word stuck with me, handled, like I was a bill or a repair. There was a long silence, then his voice again, low and tight. He needs time. He's had time. More silence, then she said, if you won't do it, I will. I remember pressing my palm against the vent, feeling the faint warmth of the air moving through. My dad spoke again. I couldn't hear the words this time, just the shape of them. Slow. Measured. Her chair scraped against the floor. Fine, she said. Tomorrow. The kitchen light clicked off a few seconds later. I went upstairs quietly and packed the suitcase I'd barely touched since my last trip months earlier. The zipper sounded too loud in the still house. Around midnight, I heard my dad's footsteps outside my room. He stopped at the door, didn't knock, just stood there. The floor creaked once under his weight. Then again as he walked away, and somehow that moment felt more final than the morning conversation that came after. The first night after I left, I slept on a borrowed couch with my suitcase still zipped shut on the floor beside me. I didn't unpack because I kept expecting a call. Something simple, like come back or we need to talk. Even a short message would have been enough. Nothing came. After a week, I stopped checking my phone every hour. After a month, I stopped expecting anything at all. I stayed with different people at first, rotating through spare rooms and couches until I found a cheap place that rented month to month. The walls were thin and the carpet smelled faintly sour, but it was mine in the only way that mattered. No one could decide I didn't belong there anymore. My dad sent one text a few weeks after I left. Hope you're doing okay, no question mark. I stared at that message for a long time before answering. Yeah, that was the whole conversation. We didn't fight. That might have made it easier to understand. There was no dramatic ending, no slammed doors or angry words echoing afterward, just distance that stretched quietly between us. Birthdays turned into short messages. Happy birthday, thanks. Holidays became optional. Sometimes he asked if I was coming by. Sometimes he didn't. Most years I stayed away anyway. It was simpler to believe he had chosen her over me. That explanation fit everything neatly into place. Clean lines. Clear sides. Eventually I stopped saying my dad's house. I started saying where they live. And once that shift happened, there wasn't really a way back. About 2 years after I left, I ran into someone who used to live a few houses down from us. He recognized me before I recognized him, calling my name across a parking lot like nothing had changed. We talked for a few minutes, the usual surface stuff, work, rent, how time moves faster than it should. Then he said something casually, like it wasn't important. Your stepmom fixed the place up real nice after you moved out. I nodded, not sure where he was going. Turned your room into an office, right? Looks professional now. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Yeah. Yeah. Desk, shelves, new paint. Your dad was hauling stuff out for days. Hauling stuff out, the words stuck harder than they should have. I imagined my things stacked in boxes by the curb. Old books. Cheap trophies. The lamp I'd had since middle school. Things that had stayed in that room longer than she had. Guess it worked out, he said. Quieter house and all. Quieter, that was the story that finally made everything make sense. She wanted space, he wanted peace, and I was the piece that didn't fit. After that, I stopped wondering whether he might have had reasons I didn't understand. The neighbor's story filled in the gaps too neatly to question. He hadn't been forced, he hadn't been trapped, he had helped clear the room himself, and somehow that detail settled into my mind like proof, the final confirmation that I'd been something temporary in a place he meant to keep permanent. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was halfway through reheating leftovers. I almost ignored it when I saw his name. We usually texted. Calls meant effort, and effort between us always felt suspicious. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, he said, same voice. Same steady tone. Like we'd talked last week instead of months ago. Hey. A short silence settled in, the kind that used to feel normal between us but now felt rehearsed. How've you been? He asked. Fine. Another pause, then he cleared his throat. I was hoping we could talk. Not catch up. Not visit, talk. I leaned against the counter, watching steam gather on the microwave door. About what? It's something I could use your help with. The word help landed wrong. We weren't people who helped each other anymore. With what? I asked, another hesitation. The house. My grip tightened on the phone before I realized it. What about it? It needs work. More than I can handle alone. That surprised me. He used to fix everything himself, doors, pipes, wiring, whatever broke. Asking for help didn't sound like him. You've got people for that, I said, not like this. Silence again, then he added quietly, I'd rather it be you. That part made something old and uncomfortable shift in my chest. I didn't answer right away. Finally I said, I'll think about it. He sounded relieved too quickly. Okay. That's all I'm asking. After we hung up, I stood there a long time with the cold container still in my hand, because the strange thing wasn't that he needed help, it was that he sounded careful, like he was choosing every word around something he wasn't saying. I waited 3 days before calling him back, not because I needed time to decide. I already knew I was going. Curiosity outweighed everything else, anger, pride, the quiet promise I'd made to myself never to step inside that house again. He suggested Saturday morning. Same practical tone he'd always used when planning things that didn't involve feelings. When I pulled into the driveway, nothing looked different at first. Same siding, same cracked edge along the concrete where winter always split it a little wider. The place felt smaller than I remembered, like distance had shrunk it. My dad opened the door before I knocked. For a second we just stood there, measuring each other without saying it out loud. He looked older than I expected. Not dramatically, just worn around the edges, like something had been pressing on him for a long time. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly dusty, not like the clean citrus scent my stepmother used to insist on. That struck me before anything else. She's not here? I asked. He shook his head. No, he didn't explain further, and I didn't ask. We walked toward the back of the house. My eyes drifted automatically toward the hallway where my old room had been. The door was closed, same door, same frame. He noticed me looking. It's mostly structural stuff, he said quickly. Foundation, some water damage. I nodded, but he kept talking like he needed to stay ahead of my questions. When he finally opened the door, I expected to see an office. Instead, the room looked almost exactly the way I remembered it, and that didn't make sense at all. I stepped into the room slowly, like something might disappear if I moved too fast. The walls were the same dull color I remembered. No fresh paint, no shelves, no desk. The old curtain rod still sagged slightly in the middle. Even the small dent near the closet door was exactly where it had always been. It wasn't staged to look old. It was old, unused. Dust lay in a thin, even layer across the windowsill and baseboards, undisturbed except for a narrow path near the door where footsteps had passed over the years. This doesn't look like an office, I said. My dad stayed in the doorway. It wasn't. That answer landed quietly but heavily. I turned toward him. The neighbor said you cleared everything out. We moved some things, he said. Not all. His voice had that same careful tone from the phone call. I opened the closet. Inside were a few boxes stacked against the back wall. One of them had my handwriting across the top in faded marker. Another still had the old tape curling at the edges. Nothing thrown away, nothing replaced, just waiting. I ran my hand across the top box, leaving a clean streak through the dust. Why keep it like this? I asked. He didn't answer right away. When I turned back, he was watching the floor instead of me. It just stayed that way, he said, but the explanation felt thin, too thin. On the way out, something caught my eye near the doorframe, a narrow strip of wood slightly lighter than the rest. Like something used to be mounted there, something small, something that had been removed later, and for the first time since coming back, I had the uneasy sense that the story I believed might be missing pieces. We worked for a while before either of us mentioned the room again. Most of it was exactly what he'd said, damp wood near the back wall, a section of floor that dipped slightly when you stepped on it. Real problems. Expensive ones. The kind that didn't show from the outside. He moved slower than I remembered, pausing sometimes like he needed to think through movements that used to come automatically. At one point he sat down on an overturned bucket and wiped his hands on a rag that was already stained dark with old work. Without looking at me, he said, "She didn't want you there because of the house." I stopped tightening the clamp in my hand. "What does that mean?" He took a breath that sounded heavier than the work we'd been doing. "We were going to lose it." The words came out flat, like he'd practiced saying them without emotion. I waited. The mortgage was behind. A lot. He rubbed his thumb against the edge of the rag. "More than I could fix." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "So you kicked me out to save money?" He shook his head slowly. "No." A long silence stretched between us. Then he said, quieter, "She agreed to stay if we reduced expenses. Said we needed fewer people living there. Lower utilities. Less food. Fewer costs." The clamp slipped slightly in my grip. "That was the deal?" I asked. Part of me already knew the answer. He nodded once. "I thought it would be temporary." Temporary, the same word he'd used years ago, but then he added something that didn't fit the story I'd built in my head. "I kept your room because if you came back." The agreement ended. The truth hit harder than I expected. All the anger, the silence, the sense of being abandoned, it had been wrapped in necessity. My dad hadn't chosen her over me out of preference. He had been trapped by a situation I couldn't have understood at 15. I sank onto the floorboards, the dust settling into my palms as if marking the moment. Every old cabinet, every dented wall, every box left in the corner suddenly carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. "So you let her kick me out," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "And you just watched?" He didn't flinch. Didn't defend himself. He only looked at me, tired, eyes lined with the same careful sadness I'd noticed when I returned. "I couldn't do both," he said. "Not then. I didn't have the leverage, and I didn't want to fight her. Not like that." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'd spent years imagining he had ignored me, allowed her to erase my presence. But he had been making a sacrifice I hadn't seen, bearing the brunt of the conflict silently while trying to preserve something for me. "If I ever returned, I hated you for it," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I can't undo that." I wanted to scream, to accuse him, to demand that he explain every lost birthday, every silent holiday, every lonely night I had endured, but the room felt impossibly small for shouting. The boxes, the old walls, the faint smell of dust, they all seemed to press down with a patient weight. Insisting I listen rather than react, I realized then that knowing didn't mean forgiveness. It didn't even make me feel relief. It just made the story more complicated. And complicated stories don't have easy endings. I left that night carrying my toolbox, my hands and mind full, but my heart heavier than when I'd arrived. I've been home a few times since that day, but the quiet hasn't gone away. Every corner of that house reminds me of choices I didn't understand at 15, and of the ones I still can't decide on now. I think about the years I spent convinced my dad abandoned me. How easy it would have been to write him off entirely, to let the anger build until it became part of who I am. And part of me still wants to. Part of me still wants to protect the version of myself that was hurt and powerless, but then I remember the truth, the mortgage, the quiet sacrifices, the way he left my room untouched. And I ask myself, do I owe him anything? Loyalty? Forgiveness? Or at the very least, understanding? I don't know. Some nights I picture him standing in the kitchen, holding that coffee mug like he always did, silent but present, trapped in a decision he thought was temporary. And I feel the old anger flare up, followed immediately by something heavier, regret that I never tried to see the pieces of the puzzle before judging him, yet I also feel the sting of all those birthdays, holidays, and lonely nights. The memories of feeling invisible, of being told, without words, that I wasn't enough to stay. Those aren't easy to erase or reconcile. Maybe the hardest part is that there is no neat resolution. No final verdict. Just a house filled with dust, a room that waited for me, and a father who carried a burden silently for years. I haven't decided if I can forgive him. I haven't decided if I even want to. But I know one thing, knowing the truth doesn't make the choice any easier. And maybe it never will. Sometimes, I wonder if I even should.